Michael Bennett stared at his reflection in the gym mirror, his eyes tracing every perceived flaw with surgical precision. The fluorescent lights of the downtown Los Angeles fitness center were unforgiving, highlighting what he saw as his inadequate frame despite the 18 months of relentless training. At 23, he'd become a prisoner of his own perception, trapped in a body he couldn't seem to perfect, no matter how hard he pushed. 2 more sets, Mike. Don't slack now, his personal trainer Ryan called from across the weight room, his voice carrying over the pulsing beats of the workout playlist. Michael nodded, forcing himself to complete the bench press rep despite his trembling arms. The physical exhaustion was nothing compared to the mental fatigue of never measuring up. Later, as Michael gathered his gym bag, Ryan approached with the characteristic confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. "Looking solid, man. Those protein shakes working for you?" Michael managed a tight smile. "Yeah, thanks." The lie came easily now. The truth that he'd been restricting his calories to dangerous levels while doubling his cardio would only invite concern, or worse, judgment. Outside, the California sun beat down on the busy street. Michael pulled his hoodie tighter despite the heat, a shield against the world he imagined was constantly evaluating his appearance. His phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram, another fitness influencer posting a transformation photo with the caption, "No excuses." Michael's thumb hovered over the like button before he closed the app entirely, a small act of defiance against the digital world that fed his insecurities daily. The walk to his apartment in Silver Lake was Michael's time to mentally rehearse his evening routine. A carefully measured dinner, another workout session in his living room, and then scrolling through fitness forums until exhaustion claimed him. His graduate studies in psychology at UCLA had taken a back seat to his obsession, his thesis on cognitive behavioral therapy techniques gathering digital dust while he pursued the elusive perfect physique. His phone rang, his mother calling from Chicago. Michael hesitated before answering. "Hey, Mom." "Michael, I've been trying to reach you all week. How are you, honey?" Her voice carried the warmth of home and the concern he'd been avoiding. "Just busy with school." He lied again, bypassing the fact that he'd skipped 2 classes that week to fit in extra gym sessions. "How's Dad?" "He's good. Still working too much. When are you coming to visit? It's been months and we miss you." The thought of his parents seeing him in his current state, what he perceived as scrawny and weak despite what others might see as a perfectly normal or even fit physique, sent a wave of anxiety through him. Maybe after this semester, he deflected. The conversation continued with his mother chatting about family news while Michael climbed the stairs to his apartment. By the time he hung up, the familiar knot of guilt had formed in his stomach. His family loved him unconditionally, yet he couldn't bring himself to be honest about his struggles. Inside his apartment, Michael pulled out his food scale and meticulously measured his dinner. 6 ounces of grilled chicken, a cup of steamed broccoli, and half a sweet potato. His roommate, Dave, walked in as he was logging the meal in his tracking app. "Dude, a bunch of us are heading to that new place on Sunset. You should come," Dave offered, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Thanks, but I've got to finish a paper," Michael replied, the excuse ready and well-worn. Dave hesitated, concern flashing across his features. "You've been saying that for weeks. When's the last time you actually went out?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortably accurate. Michael couldn't remember. Social gatherings meant food he couldn't control, drinks with empty calories, and worst of all, comparisons to other men who seemed naturally blessed with the physique he tortured himself to achieve. "I'll come next time," Michael promised, knowing it was unlikely. After Dave left, the silence of the apartment amplified the voices in Michael's head, the critical ones that had been his constant companions since high school. Back then, he'd been the slightly chubby, awkward teenager who preferred books to sports. Now, despite his transformation, those same voices insisted he was still not enough. Michael's phone lit up with a text from his sister Emma. "Check your email. Sent you something important." Curious, he opened his inbox to find an article Emma had forwarded. The rising epidemic of male body dysmorphia in the age of social media. The subject line was followed by a simple message. Made me think of you. And call me if you want to talk. A cold sensation spread through Michael's chest. Was he that transparent? Or was Emma, with her characteristic intuition, seeing what he tried so hard to hide? He closed the email without reading the article, but the title echoed in his mind as he mechanically completed his evening workout. That night, lying in bed, exhausted yet unable to sleep, Michael scrolled through his camera roll, comparing photos of himself from months ago to recent ones. The changes were there, more defined arms, less softness around his midsection, but all he could see were the remaining imperfections, the ways he still didn't measure up to the filtered ideals that dominated his social media feeds. A notification appeared. Emma texting again. Did you read it? It's not just you, Mike. Lots of guys are struggling with this. Michael stared at the ceiling, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. The weight of his secret was becoming unbearable, but the idea of admitting weakness felt even worse. How had he, a psychology student who should know better, become so lost in this twisted perception of himself? With trembling fingers, he typed back, "I'll read it tomorrow. Thanks." It was a small concession, but perhaps the first crack in the fortress of denial he'd built around himself. As sleep finally claimed him, Michael dreamed of running, not on a treadmill toward an impossible goal, but in an open field, free from the constraints he'd placed upon himself. The UCLA campus bustled with life as Michael hurried across the quad, his coffee growing cold in the travel mug he clutched like a lifeline. He was running late for his advanced psychopathology seminar, the third time this month. Dr. Levine, his thesis advisor, had noticed his slipping attendance and declining participation, cornering him after the last class with concerned eyes and an invitation to talk any time. Michael slipped into the lecture hall just as Dr. Levine was introducing the day's topic, eating disorders and body image disturbances. The irony wasn't lost on him as he sank into a seat in the back row, attempting to make himself invisible. While anorexia and bulimia are still predominantly diagnosed in women, emerging research shows a significant rise in similar disorders among men, Dr. Levine explained, clicking to a slide showing statistics. However, male presentation often differs, manifesting as muscle dysmorphia or what some call bigorexia, an obsessive desire to be more muscular regardless of actual appearance. Michael's pen hovered over his notebook, unable to take notes as the professor unwittingly described the very thoughts that consumed him daily. The classroom suddenly felt too warm, too small. He tugged at his collar, acutely aware of his rapid heartbeat. The fitness industry and social media have created a perfect storm, Dr. Levine continued. Men are now exposed to idealized male bodies at unprecedented rates, often heavily edited or representing physiques that are unattainable without extreme measures, sometimes including performance-enhancing substances. A student in the front row raised her hand. Is this related to traditional masculine ideals of strength and power? Excellent question, Maya. Absolutely. Cultural messaging equating physical strength with personal worth creates a dangerous narrative. Michael's focus drifted as memories surfaced from his adolescence. The casual comments from his high school coach about bulking up, his father's well-intentioned suggestion that he hit the gym before college, the first time a girl he liked chose someone more athletic. Each memory stung afresh, threads in the tapestry of his current obsession. After class, Michael hurried toward the exit, but Dr. Levine called his name. Michael, got a minute? Reluctantly, he approached his professor's desk, gripping the strap of his backpack. I know I've missed some classes. I'm sorry. Dr. Levine waved away the apology. I'm more concerned about you than your attendance record. You were one of my most engaged students last semester, and now... She paused, studying his face. Is everything okay? Just busy, Michael offered weakly, balancing work and school. The professor's expression showed she wasn't convinced. Today's topic seemed to resonate with you. I noticed you weren't taking notes. Michael shifted uncomfortably. I was listening. Michael, as psychologists, even ones in training, we sometimes think we're immune to the very issues we study. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a business card. This is Dr. Reyes at the University Health Center. He specializes in body image issues, particularly in men. Many students find talking to someone objective helps. Michael took the card automatically, his defenses rising. I appreciate it, but I'm fine, really. Dr. Levine nodded, not pushing further. Keep it anyway. And remember, recognizing our own struggles doesn't make us less qualified to help others. Quite the opposite. The words followed Michael as he left the building, the business card burning a hole in his pocket. Outside, he checked his fitness app. He'd only logged 8,000 steps for the day, well below his minimum target of 15,000. The thought of skipping his gym session to catch up on thesis research sent a wave of anxiety through him. His phone pinged with a reminder. Emma, call 7 p.m. He'd been avoiding his sister since she sent the article, which he'd finally read at 3 in the morning during a bout of insomnia. The piece had described symptoms so familiar they might have been pulled directly from his daily thoughts, using terms like body checking and comparison behaviors that gave clinical names to his habitual actions. As Michael crossed campus toward the recreation center, he spotted Dave sitting with a group of friends on the lawn, enjoying the afternoon sunshine. Dave waved him over enthusiastically. "Mike, join us! We're debating the merits of various breakfast burritos in LA." Michael hesitated, calculating the minutes this detour would cost him. "I can't. Heading to the gym." Dave's smile faltered slightly. "Again? Didn't you go this morning?" "Just a quick session," Michael replied defensively. A woman in the group, Katie, he recalled from Dave's political science class, looked up at him. "You know, there's this great yoga class at the rec center on Thursdays. Not as intense as your usual workouts, probably, but amazing for stress." Something in her casual invitation, free from judgment or expectation, pierced Michael's armor. When was the last time he'd done any physical activity purely for enjoyment rather than punishment or pursuit of an ideal? "Maybe sometime," he managed before continuing his journey to the gym. The recreation center was crowded with afternoon visitors. Michael changed quickly, avoiding his reflection in the locker room mirror, a practiced routine. On the weight floor, he moved mechanically through his sets, pushing past fatigue, ignoring the dull pain in his shoulder that had been getting worse for weeks. Midway through his workout, his phone rang. Emma, calling early. Michael nearly declined the call, but remembered the worry in her last text. He stepped into the hallway and answered. "Hey, Em. Mikey, I didn't think you'd pick up." Her voice carried the familiar warmth of sibling affection. "How are you, really?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, cracked something inside him. Michael leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely audible over the gym's background noise. "I read that article." A moment of silence. "And it felt like reading about myself." The confession hung between them, the first time he'd acknowledged his struggle aloud. Emma's voice softened. "I thought it might. Listen, I have a friend who went through something similar. He joined this support group in Chicago that really helped him. I bet LA has something like that. I'm studying psychology, Em. I should be able to fix this myself," Michael said, the irony of his situation not lost on him. "That's like saying a dermatologist should never get acne," Emma countered. "Everyone needs help sometimes, especially with the stuff closest to them." As they talked, Michael watched other gym-goers pass by, men and women of all shapes and sizes, some with professional physiques, others simply there to move their bodies. For a brief moment, he wondered what it would be like to view his workouts as celebration of what his body could do rather than punishment for what it wasn't. "There's this professor who gave me a contact," Michael found himself saying. "Someone who specializes in this stuff." "That's great, Mike. Will you call them?" The question hung in the air. Making that call would mean admitting he couldn't control this on his own, that the knowledge he was accumulating in his psychology program wasn't enough to overcome his own demons. "I'll think about it," he promised, meaning it more than he had expected to. After hanging up, Michael returned to the gym floor, but something had shifted. He completed his routine with less intensity, skipping the punishing extra sets he usually forced himself through. Outside, the California evening was settling in, palm trees silhouetted against a deepening blue sky. On impulse, he took a different route home, one that led through a small neighborhood park. Families were gathering for picnic dinners, children chasing each other across the grass with uninhibited joy in their movements. Michael found an empty bench and sat, watching the scene unfold. His phone buzzed with a notification from his calorie-tracking app, reminding him he was behind on his protein intake for the day. For the first time in months, he swiped it away without opening it. Instead, he pulled out Dr. Reyes's card and studied it in the fading light. Making the call would mean acknowledging that his relationship with his body had become unhealthy, that the pursuit, meant to make him feel better about himself, was actually destroying his sense of worth from the inside out. With a deep breath, Michael saved the number in his contacts. He wasn't ready to call yet, but it was a step, a small acknowledgement that perhaps there was a path forward that didn't require perfection. As darkness fell, he finally stood and continued home, walking at a leisurely pace that would have bothered him earlier that day. The critical voice in his head was still there, noting the missed training opportunity, calculating the calories he'd burn at this slower pace. But now, for the first time in months, it was joined by another voice, quieter but persistent, whispering that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than the endless pursuit of an unattainable ideal. The waiting room of the UCLA Counseling and Psychological Services Center was deliberately designed to be calming. Soft blue walls, natural light filtering through blinds, generic landscape art that offended no one. Still, Michael's leg bounced nervously as he checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. He'd rescheduled this appointment twice already. The first time, he'd convinced himself it was because of a study group conflict. The second, he'd simply lost his nerve. But Emma's persistent texts and a particularly bad night, where he'd spent hours comparing old photos of himself, had finally pushed him through the door. "Michael Bennett!" A man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and glasses appeared in the doorway, holding a clipboard. "I'm Dr. Reyes." Michael followed him down a short hallway to a comfortable office with bookshelves lining one wall. No couch, just 2 armchairs arranged at a conversational angle. "Doctor." Reyes gestured for Michael to take a seat. "So, Dr. Levine mentioned you're in the psychology program. That's my alma mater," Dr. Reyes said, his tone conversational rather than clinical. "What's your focus?" "Cognitive behavioral therapy," Michael replied, relaxing slightly at the familiar topic. "I'm particularly interested in its applications for anxiety disorders." Dr. Reyes nodded appreciatively. "Excellent field. The mind's ability to reshape itself through intentional practice is remarkable." He paused, setting his clipboard aside. "It can make it challenging, though, when we need to turn those tools on ourselves." The gentle observation landed exactly where Michael was most vulnerable. He looked down at his hands, suddenly unsure why he'd come. "I don't even know if there's a problem," he admitted. "I mean, wanting to be healthy and fit isn't a disorder." "You're absolutely right," Dr. Reyes agreed. "The line between healthy habits and harmful obsessions can be blurry, especially in a culture that often praises extreme dedication to fitness. What brings you here today?" The simple question opened a floodgate. Michael found himself talking about his daily routines, the hours spent comparing himself to others online, the growing isolation from friends, the academic work suffering under the weight of his fixation. As he spoke, Dr. Reyes listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "I know how irrational it sounds," Michael concluded. "I'm literally studying these cognitive distortions in class, but I can't seem to apply the knowledge to myself." Dr. Reyes leaned forward slightly. Knowledge and insight are important first steps, but they're not always enough to change entrenched patterns. Our relationship with our bodies is complex, shaped by personal history, cultural messages, and biological factors. The validation in those words was unexpectedly powerful. Michael had spent so long berating himself for not being able to think his way out of his obsession that the permission to acknowledge its complexity felt like a weightlifting. "I'd like to introduce you to a concept called body neutrality," Dr. Reyes continued. "It's a middle path between the negative self-image you're experiencing and the often equally unattainable goal of complete body positivity." What does that mean exactly? It means working toward viewing your body as neither good nor bad, but simply as the physical form that carries you through life, appreciating what it does for you rather than focusing exclusively on how it looks. Michael considered this. "That sounds peaceful." Dr. Reyes smiled. "It can be. It's also a journey, not a destination you reach overnight. Would you be open to joining a men's support group I facilitate? It meets weekly, focusing specifically on male body image and relationship with fitness." The thought of sharing his struggles with strangers sent a jolt of anxiety through Michael. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "That's completely understandable. How about we continue one-on-one for now, and I can tell you more about the group so you can consider it." By the time the session ended, Michael had a follow-up appointment scheduled and a simple homework assignment: to spend 10 minutes each day doing something physical purely for enjoyment, with no fitness goal attached. Outside, the California sunshine seemed brighter somehow. Michael checked his phone to find several missed texts from Dave about a study group that evening. For once, he didn't immediately calculate whether he could fit it around his gym schedule. Instead, he texted back a simple, "I'll be there." That evening, the study group convened in the university library's group room. Michael arrived to find Dave, Katie from the lawn gathering, and 2 other classmates already deep in discussion about their upcoming research projects. "Mike, grab a seat," Dave called, genuinely surprised but pleased to see him. "We're just debating methodological approaches for the case study assignment." As Michael joined the conversation, he found himself engaging with the material in a way he hadn't for months. His own thesis ideas, long neglected in favor of workout plans and meal preps, began to resurface. When Katie mentioned struggling with the literature review section, Michael found himself offering suggestions based on his earlier research. "Wow, you really know your stuff," she commented, scribbling notes. "Thanks for the help." The simple acknowledgement of his academic abilities, a part of his identity that had nothing to do with his physical appearance, felt surprisingly good. The evening continued with the group working productively and occasionally breaking into conversation about campus events and shared professors. When someone suggested getting dinner afterwards, Michael's instinctive response was to decline. The thought of an unplanned meal still triggered anxiety. But before he could make his excuse, Katie mentioned a new ramen place that offered vegetarian options. "I've been wanting to try that place," he found himself saying, the words surprising him as much as everyone else. At the restaurant, Michael navigated the menu carefully, but without the usual panic. He ordered a vegetable ramen that looked satisfying without triggering his food anxieties. As the group conversation flowed around him, touching on movies, politics, and campus gossip, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: presence. He was actually in the moment, rather than mentally calculating calories or planning his next workout. "Earth to Michael," Dave teased, waving a hand in front of his face. "You zoned out there. We were asking about your internship applications." "Sorry," Michael smiled. "Just realizing it's been a while since I did this. Just hung out, I mean." Katie tilted her head curiously. "What do you usually do in the evenings?" "Gym, mostly," Michael admitted. "I got pretty obsessive about it for a while." The simple acknowledgement, casual but honest, felt like another small step. No one at the table seemed particularly shocked or judgmental. "I went through a phase like that in undergrad. one of the other students, Jason, offered. Got so caught up in getting swole that I barely passed organic chemistry. My dad had to basically stage an intervention. The casual way Jason referenced his own experience made Michael realize he wasn't as alone as he'd thought. How'd you get past it? Jason shrugged. Slowly. Found other things that mattered more. Started rock climbing, which was still physical, but more about problem solving than how I looked. That helped. The conversation moved on, but Michael carried that moment with him. After dinner, as the group dispersed with casual goodbyes and promises to meet again, Katie fell into step beside him as they walked toward the campus apartments. "It was nice having you join us tonight," she said. "Dave's always saying how smart you are, but you never come to these things." Michael felt a flush of embarrassment mixed with pleasure at the second-hand compliment. "I've been kind of in my own head lately." Katie nodded. "I get that. Last year was rough for me. Had some health issues that made me reevaluate a lot of things." She glanced at him. "Sometimes the body forces you to listen when the mind won't slow down." There was no expectation in her words, just a simple sharing of experience. As they reached the point where their paths diverged, Katie smiled. "The study group meets every Thursday. You're always welcome." That night, Michael lay in bed reviewing the day. For the first time in months, he hadn't checked the fitness tracking app before sleeping, hadn't scrutinized his reflection for changes, hadn't ended the day feeling he'd failed to measure up. It was a small victory, but real. His phone lit up with a text from Emma. "How was today?" Michael typed back. "Better. I went to the counseling center and had dinner with friends." Emma's response was immediate. "Proud of you, Mikey." The simple message brought unexpected tears to his eyes. For so long, he'd equated worth with appearance, measuring his value in pounds lifted and body fat percentage. The reminder that he was loved simply for being himself, for taking steps to heal, for showing up, felt revolutionary. Outside his window, the Los Angeles night pulsed with life. Michael set his alarm, not for an early morning gym session but for his first class, allowing himself the luxury of adequate sleep. As he drifted off, the critical voice that had been his constant companion was quieter than it had been in months, making space for new possibilities to emerge in the silence. The Santa Monica beach stretched before Michael, golden sand meeting the Pacific under a perfect blue sky. 6 months had passed since his first session with Dr. Reyes, and while not every day had been a victory, the trajectory had been steadily upward. "Heads up!" a voice called, and Michael instinctively raised his hands to catch the frisbee sailing toward him. He sent it spinning back toward Dave, who was playing with Katie and several other friends from their program. The simple joy of moving his body without purpose beyond play still felt novel, after so long viewing exercise as punishment or means to an end. Michael jogged toward the group, no longer wearing a shirt to hide his body. His physique hadn't changed dramatically over the past months. He still worked out regularly, but with moderation rather than obsession, yet his relationship with it had transformed profoundly. "Water break," Dave announced, collapsing dramatically onto their beach blanket. "Mike, toss me a bottle." Michael obliged, settling onto the sand beside Katie, who was applying another layer of sunscreen. The easy physical proximity to others no longer triggered the intense comparative thoughts that once would have dominated his consciousness. "How was group this week?" Katie asked quietly. In the months since they'd become closer, she'd been a steady support, never pushing but always interested in his progress. "Good," Michael replied. "We talked about coping with summer, how it can trigger body anxiety for a lot of guys, beach season and all that." "And how are you feeling about it?" she asked, gesturing to the crowded shoreline, where bodies of all shapes and sizes enjoyed the day. Michael considered the question seriously. "Better than I expected. I still have moments, but they pass quicker now." He smiled wryly. The body neutrality thing is starting to make sense. That afternoon, as the group packed up to head to a nearby restaurant for an early dinner, Michael's phone rang. Dr. Levine, his thesis advisor. "Michael, good news," she said when he answered. The Journal of Cognitive Behavioral Practice is interested in publishing an adapted version of your thesis research. They're specifically interested in your personal perspective section on male body image interventions. The validation sent a wave of pride through him. His thesis, once neglected as his obsession with fitness took over, had eventually evolved to incorporate his own experience, combining academic research with personal insight in a way Dr. Levine had called exceptionally valuable. "That's amazing," Michael responded, genuinely thrilled. "Thank you for submitting it." "Your work deserves recognition," Dr. Levine said warmly. "And speaking of recognition, have you given any more thought to the research assistant position in the department next year? You'd be working directly with the eating disorders prevention team." "Actually, I was going to email you about that," Michael said. "I'd like to accept the position." After ending the call, Michael rejoined his friends with a broad smile. "Good news?" Dave asked. "The best," Michael confirmed. "My thesis is getting published, and I just accepted a research position for next year." The group erupted in congratulations, Katie squeezing his arm supportively. As they walked toward the restaurant, Michael reflected on how different his priorities had become. Academic accomplishments that once seemed secondary to physical goals now filled him with genuine pride. At the restaurant, Michael ordered a burger, without the mental calculations that would have once accompanied such a choice. The men's support group had been particularly helpful with normalizing eating, creating space to discuss the unique pressures men faced around food, the expectation to either restrict heavily for cutting or consume enormous portions for bulking, with little room for simply enjoying meals. As dinner progressed, Dave raised his glass in a toast. "To Michael getting published and to summer adventures." The group clinked glasses, and conversation flowed to plans for the break. Someone mentioned a hiking trip to Joshua Tree, and Michael found himself volunteering to help organize it, another shift from the days when he would have evaluated such activities solely on their calorie-burning potential. Later that evening, Michael sat on the balcony of his apartment, laptop open as he composed an email. The recipient list included Dr. Reyes and several members of the men's support group who had given permission to be contacted for research purposes. After months of participation, Michael had proposed developing additional resources specifically addressing male body image in the fitness community, and several group members had expressed interest in contributing. As he typed, Michael heard a knock at the door. Katie entered with 2 cups of tea, setting one beside him before taking the adjacent chair. "Working on the resource guide?" she asked, peering at his screen. Michael nodded. "Just finalizing some details. A couple of the guys from group have connections at gyms willing to display materials addressing body image. It's a small start, but it matters," Katie finished for him. "One gym at a time." Michael smiled, grateful for her understanding. They had been dating for 2 months now, a relationship that evolved naturally from friendship built on mutual respect and shared interests beyond the physical. The contrast to his previous approach to dating, where he'd avoided intimacy out of fear of being judged for his body, was stark. "I talked to Emma today," Michael said, setting his laptop aside. "She's coming to visit next month, says she wants to meet everyone, especially you." "I'm looking forward to it," Katie replied. "From everything you've said, she sounds amazing." "She is," Michael agreed, thinking of his sister's unwavering support through his darkest periods. "She was the first person who saw what was happening, even before I could admit it to myself." The evening air was cool against his skin as they sat in comfortable silence. Below, the Los Angeles traffic created a constant urban hum, punctuated by occasional sirens and music from neighboring apartments. It was the soundtrack of a life Michael was now fully participating in, rather than merely observing from behind the walls of his obsession. His phone buzzed with a notification from the fitness app he still used, though with a radically different approach. Where once it had been a taskmaster driving him toward unattainable goals, he'd reconfigured it to track his overall well-being. sleep quality, stress levels, and enjoyment of activities rather than just physical metrics. "Oh, I meant to tell you," Katie said suddenly. "Jason mentioned the Wellness Center is looking for graduate students to lead some workshops next semester. One of them is on healthy relationships with fitness. I immediately thought of you." Michael considered this. A year ago, the idea of publicly discussing his struggles would have been unthinkable. Now, it felt like a natural extension of his journey. "I think I'd like that," he said. "Maybe help some other guys realize they're not alone earlier than I did." Later that night, as Michael prepared for bed, he caught sight of his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The habitual body check that once dominated such moments had been replaced by a brief, neutral acknowledgement. His body was neither enemy nor project, simply the physical form that allowed him to experience life, to connect with others, to make a difference. He thought of the young men who might benefit from the resources he was helping to develop, imagining them finding their way to self-acceptance earlier in their journeys. The purpose felt right, using his experience to create something meaningful from what had once been only pain. In bed, Michael opened his journal, a practice Dr. Reyes had suggested months ago. At the top of the page, he wrote the date and then, after a moment's reflection, added a title, "Proud of Every Inch." As he began to write about the day's events, Michael recognized how far he had come from the young man who once avoided mirrors and social gatherings, who measured his worth in repetitions and restrictions. The journey hadn't been linear, and he still had difficult days when old thought patterns resurfaced, but increasingly those moments were just that, moments, not his entire reality. Outside, the Los Angeles night continued its rhythmic pulse. Michael closed his journal and set it aside, ready for sleep untroubled by the anxieties that once kept him awake, calculating the next day's workout or analyzing perceived flaws. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and victories, and for perhaps the first time since his journey began, Michael felt genuinely equipped to meet them, not because his body had changed dramatically, but because his perspective had. As sleep approached, Michael's final thought was simple yet profound. The most important transformation hadn't been physical at all, but in learning that his body was worthy of respect and care exactly as it was, a vehicle for experiencing life rather than an obstacle to living it. The realization, once merely intellectual, had finally settled into his bones, a truth he now carried in every cell. He was enough, exactly as he was.